Will Ange Postecoglou leave Celtic? That is the big question coming out of the green side of Glasgow at the moment. Welcome back, guys, to Fog Football. And I feel like it's a kind of weird time in Glasgow. You've got one side of the old firm that are desperate to get their manager out of the club, and then you've got the other side of the old firm that would pretty much do anything to keep their manager at the club. And that man is Ange Postecoglou. And why wouldn't you want to keep Ange? Now, before any Celtic fans start slabbering, start saying how good Ange is, you don't need to tell me. After match day 2 last season, I said 100% Celtic would win the league. After match day 6, half the Celtic fans still wanted Ange sacked from the club. So, you don't need to tell me that Ange is great. I've seen it with my own eyes. I know how good Ange is, and it is no surprise that other clubs want Ange. That doesn't surprise me at all. But now, it's not just clubs that want Ange, it is countries. And one of those countries is Japan, a country that Ange has experience in, he's had a lot of knowledge in, he's won titles in Japan before, we've seen how he's brought in a bunch of Japanese players into Celtic, so you could argue that Ange likes the country of Japan. He might have a love relationship with Japan, but would that be enough to tempt Ange to leave Celtic and take up the Japanese national team? Well, that's what we're going to try and find out in this video. Firstly, let's look at some reasons why Ange might be interested in this job, reasons why Ange might take this opportunity to manage the Japanese national team. First of all, Japan, based in the continent of Asia, as is Australia, as is most of Ange's family. Perhaps this would be a good move for Ange. He'd be closer to home, be closer to family. Culture-wise, I'm pretty sure it's a different culture in Asia, so maybe Ange would feel more at home in Japan than he would in Glasgow. Maybe he prefers the weather in Japan. Maybe he likes the fact that in Japan there's none of this sectarian shit. Then you don't get walking down the street, you don't get called a Taig bastard, you don't get called a Hun bastard. Maybe Ange wants to get away from that shit. That is a possibility. Maybe he doesn't like the pish weather of Glasgow. Maybe Ange would like to take a stroll down the street without it pissing down with rain. That is another option. So I think that is important. The fact that it is in Japan, it is in his home continent, that has to be a real option as to why he would like to take this job. Another reason why he could be interested in going is, like I said earlier, he does have a lot of experience in Japan when he managed there at a club level. He took Yokohama to the J League 1 title, so he's done the business in Japan. He's been successful in Japan. Now, just because you're successful at a club level doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be successful at international level. Yes, Japan, they're not quite at the heights, they're not quite at the levels of the top teams on the national circuit. Japan aren't exactly got the player pool that Brazil have, or Germany have, or teams like that have. But I feel like Ange could definitely get the best out of the players that Japan do have. And I think he could do better than he did with Australia. I think Japan are better than Australia. Ange's got a good record at Australia. He done well with Australia, especially at the World Cup. I thought he played some good football. Okay, didn't necessarily get the results. You could argue the same about Celtic this year in the Champions League, but I definitely feel with Japan that Ange could do a better job, and I think he could take Japan further than he took Australia. Plus, he has probably improved as a coach since then. So I think Ange with Japan, not going to say they'd be World Cup winners or anything like that, but I think he could definitely get them into the knockout stages and maybe go as far as maybe quarter semis. I do think Ange could do that with the national team of Japan. Now, having said that, let's look at some reasons why Ange might not want to leave Celtic and go to Japan. First reason for me, and a very important reason, is at the end of the day, it's international football. International football isn't the same as club football. You meet up once every couple of months. There's not as many competitions, there's not as many games. It's more like part-time football, in my opinion. When I think of international football, it's like part-time football. Now, that doesn't mean it's not as important. That doesn't mean I don't love seeing Scotland play. But at the end of the day, it's like, it is part-time. It's once every often, you know, once in a while. It's not every single week. It's not like every single season you're competing for a title, you're competing for cups, you're competing for trophies. It's like international football, it's like once in a while, but even the once in a while, majority of it's friendlies, you know, and majority of it's meaningless games, if we're being completely honest. You have to wait once every 4 years for, you know, the big tournament that is the World Cup, or once every 4 years for the Euros, or in Asia, I know they've got the Asian Cup. I think that happens once every 4 years as well. I don't know, could be wrong, but I just feel like international football is more for like senior managers that are like getting older, that maybe they don't have the, you know, the youth or energy to deal with club football, the day-to-day running of a club team, so therefore they they prefer like international job, a national team, where it's not the stress load, the workload isn't as much, and you know, you meet up basically every couple of months rather than, you know, coming into training every single day. So it's definitely easier to be an international manager, and I don't see that in Ange. I think Ange is a guy that's got a lot of energy, a guy that wants to go to work every day, a guy that wants to go to training, a guy that looks forward to waking up and managing a football team, and I just think that that's why he would prefer to stay at a club level at the moment rather than a national team. He is only 57 as well, so if he did want to manage an international level, he's got a lot of years to do that. Now, there is always the possibility of both managing a club team and managing an international team, but I just think with the distance involved in the two clubs, it wouldn't work. How could you be manager of Celtic and manage Japan? I don't think it works. If you manage Japan and you manage a Japanese team or even an Australian club team, perhaps you can make that work, but I just don't feel that you could manage Japan and manage Celtic. Like, maybe manager of Celtic and manager of Scotland. Could you imagine the uproar that would cause, though, if the Celtic manager was also the Scotland manager and then he was picking like all the Celtic players and no Rangers players? Man, the holy fuck country would have a meltdown. But I don't think with the distance between the two clubs, the fact that Celtic are in Scotland and Europe, probably as far left in Europe as you can go, compared to the far right as you can go in like Asia. It's too big a gap, right? It just would not work. So therefore, he can't manage both Japan and Celtic due to the distance between both the club team of Celtic and the national team of Japan. You know, make a good impact, and for me that's just way too long, and I don't think it's a good idea personally. And the last reason I don't think he will leave Celtic is I think he's building something here. I think he's building a dynasty, and I think we're only beginning to see the beginning of the Ange Postecoglou era at Celtic. I'm not saying he's going to be there 10 years or anything like that, but I think the best of Ange at Celtic is still to come, and I don't think he's going to be leaving any time in the near future. This season or next season, I think Ange will be 100% committed to Celtic. I can see Celtic dominating in Scotland. I can see Celtic improving in Europe. And yeah, we'll see what happens. I might be right, I might be wrong, but more often than not, I'm right. So we'll see what happens. But for Fog Football, I'm going to say Ange will not leave Celtic. He will not go to Japan. And I think he is Celtic bound at least for the next few seasons. Let me know what you think down below in the comments. Let me know if you think Ange will leave Celtic to go to Japan or leave Celtic to go anywhere. In fact, there is other clubs interested in him. A number of clubs in the English League, especially Everton,